Hi, and welcome to English with Rick. This is a free lesson. If you'd like a full lesson and handouts, activities, and a transcript and things like that, go to patreon.com and you can support me making these podcasts for $5 a month. You can also, if you subscribe on Patreon, you can suggest lessons for me. So sometimes a lesson that you want can become a future lesson at English with Rick. This lesson is about phrasal verbs, and phrasal verbs are a big deal. They're a big deal because there are over 5,000 of them, and that means that English-speaking people use them often. So that's one really good reason to know them. The other good reason is that the meaning of a verb can change a lot when it becomes part of a phrasal verb, because phrasal verbs, as part of them, have a normal verb within them. So knowing that that verb can have a different meaning outside of the phrasal verb and inside the phrasal verb is crucial to understanding what somebody means when they're saying something in English, and especially when they're using a phrasal verb. Because a phrasal verb can have multiple meanings, context is important. In a couple of sentences like, the plane took off, and they took off their jackets, there's no way that took off could mean the same thing in both of those sentences. So you need to have context. In this case, the plane and the jackets give you a clue about what the phrasal verb might mean. Sometimes a phrasal verb is the most efficient way to say something. An example would be, I backed up Susan at work this weekend. There are other ways you can say that. Let me think for a moment how else I could say that. I was paid to be available this weekend in case Susan could not do all the work. It's a lot easier to just say, I backed up Susan at work this weekend. Both of those sentences actually mean the same thing. And while we're talking about the phrasal verb backed up, let's talk about stress. When you're saying a phrasal verb, normally the stress is on it's called the particle in the phrasal verb. We'll get to that in a moment. But that's the up part of backed up or back up. So it's backed up. A phrasal verb is made up of a normal verb and an adverb or preposition. When that adverb or preposition becomes part of a phrasal verb, it's known as a particle. So a phrasal verb is a normal verb and a particle. And the meaning of that verb outside of the phrasal verb and inside the phrasal verb, no relation whatsoever. They don't mean the same thing. So it's a new word. Basically, it's an idiom in verb form. Let's take a look at the phrasal verb get over. Now, get by itself means to obtain, and over means something is above something else, or sometimes better than something else, something like that. But together it means to recover from something. So the phrasal verb get over, no relationship whatsoever to the normal verb get. Phrasal verbs are conjugated and placed just like normal verbs, but there are special rules for word order. The best way to look at this is in some sentences that are in particular tenses to see how the phrasal verb is placed and what the word order is like. In the simple past tense, an example sentence would be something like, I was angry about that last week, but I got over it. Notice how the get over phrasal verb is placed and how the words are ordered in that sentence. Another sentence example in the infinitive tense would be something like, he went on vacation to get over his breakup. In the gerund form, we could use it in a sentence like, getting over the flu can take a long time. Getting a little bit more complicated, we could use phrasal verb in the past participle form. Something like, having gotten over the loss, they were ready for the next game. The verb get changes. but the particle does not. So in the verb get, which is outside or inside the phrasal verb, conjugation is the same. There are two pair types of phrasal verbs, transitive and intransitive, separable and inseparable. Take a look at the chart on the screen so you can see the difference between these different types, these pair types of phrasal verbs. A phrasal verb can only be described by one of each of the words in these pair types. So it can only be transitive or intransitive, separable or inseparable. It can never be both within a pair. So for transitive phrasal verbs, they always use a direct object. So the verb has an effect on something. A sentence like, I couldn't cheer Karen up. Karen is the object. The phrasal verb has an effect on Karen. For an intransitive phrasal verb, they do not use an object. So you could have a sentence like, the employees never would come around. The phrasal verb come around does not have any effect on an object. When you talk about separable and inseparable phrasal verb types, for separable types, the direct object can be put between the verb and the particle. You could have a sentence like, I'll pick you up after work. For inseparable phrasal verb types, the verb and the particle must always stay together. An example of this is seen in a sentence like, show up in time for work. There are a lot of phrasal verbs, but they're really worth learning because learning them will really be one of those things that helps you sound like a native speaker. Bye for now.